Welcome to the Sales Career Podcast. This is your host, Kevin Hopp. Whether you're an executive, sales leader, or just getting your career in sales started, I'm here to help you read between the lines and hear the real stories that you can't get from a resume or from a LinkedIn profile, all designed to help you shape your own sales career. Let's dive right into today's episode and see what we can learn. All right, on today's show, we have Ryan Reisert, the founder of PhoneReadyLeads.com, had many sales jobs throughout his career, including being my boss at one point. I consider him a friend, a mentor, someone to look up to. Everybody please welcome the great and powerful Ryan Reisert.
Great and powerful. That's powerful, man. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm excited for the conversation today.
Absolutely. So this is the Sales Career Podcast. You're a sales guy, I think it's fair to say.
I'm just a cold caller, Kevin.
Just a cold caller.
Just a cold caller. That's right.
Okay, just a cold caller. We'll keep that straight. We'll make sure that we're referring to you as just a cold caller. So let's talk about your career to date. You're now a founder, but you weren't always a founder. In fact, did you always think you were going to be in sales?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
I studied math. I got an engineering minor because I was actually going to be a high school teacher. I was actually a part of a national program to try to bring more STEM back to like school, right? Bring real world applications to school. And so part of that program with my math degree was to get an engineering minor so that you could,
Hey, Ryan, I can't hear you. Did your mic change?
Can you hear me now?
I got you now.
All right, yeah. Not sure where I lost you there, but I was going to be a high school math teacher. That was my original plan.
Okay, high school math teacher. And you have a degree in mathematics from some school in Eastern Washington?
Yeah. Washington State University.
Oh,
Go
Cougs.
Cougs. Yeah,
Go Cougs.
Class of 2008.
Class of 2008. Not to date yourself at all there, but fun fact for the audience, I went to UC Santa Barbara. We don't have football. We don't have really anything of significance besides a soccer team. So my best friend went to Washington State. I've been to Pullman, Washington 3 times. And ladies and gentlemen, it's far out there. You go past nothing and you keep going, and you end up in the Palouse at Washington State University. What a fun place to go to school. Cool. So you didn't think you would end up in sales. If someone looks at your LinkedIn profile, they see pretty quickly here that you rise up the ranks. You were a VP of sales, looks like kind of twice here within the first 5, 6, 7 years of your career. Talk to me a little bit about the early days and how you got into not just being in sales, but obviously excelling into leadership roles.
So I stumbled into sales after college. Again, I graduated in 2008, so it's a really exciting time, with the economy booming and all. So
it's got to be a harsh time.
For those who maybe are listening and are like, what is he talking about? This was like the heart of the financial crisis. So when I went back to Spokane, where I'm originally from, also in Eastern Washington, a lot of people know it these days because of Gonzaga. If they follow college basketball. Outside of Gonzaga University, there's not much going on in Spokane, but there's a few things. But it's a small town in Eastern Washington, smaller city in Eastern Washington. And when I went back, most of the folks I grew up with were like either already in jail or on the verge of getting into jail or on drugs and things like that. So like when I was supposed to be preparing for student teaching, what I found myself into was a lot of like interesting situations on the weekends that summer, lots of bar fights and things like that. So I was like, this is not going to go over well for a teaching career, I don't think. Although that's kind of why I went back originally. I just didn't feel like it was a good time. The economy wasn't doing so well. People were losing their jobs and I was just not feeling it. And a few of my friends from college had internships in San Francisco. And so I visited one of them on the weekend, and it was my first time really. I didn't travel a lot growing up. So it's one of my first times going to a big city, and like I got lost from the airport. I flew into Oakland, got lost in the airport trying to get into the city, and when I finally got in, I'm like coming up from the escalators off of BART, and I was looking up, and I was like, "Holy crap! Like, what is this place? You know, it's got skyscrapers and stuff. Nothing like New York, but you know, it's still got some skyscrapers and things like that." And I noticed the cars driving by were like, you know, the worst car you would see is like a Porsche. It seemed. This is my recollection, of course. And then I saw like it was either like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari parked on like at a meter, and I was like, what is this place? Back home, people are like, you know, they're losing their jobs. You know, apparently the world's burning because of the financial crisis. But here in San Francisco, I'm seeing Porsches and I think that's a Ferrari like parked on the side of the road at a meter, not like, you know, like a valet.
Not in the showroom.
Like on a meter, like not like valet. So I was like, this seems like a place I should probably check out for a longer period of time than just a weekend. I mean, the weekend was great. I had a lot of fun, and I literally went back home, called the university and said, "Hey, I'm not doing my student teaching." I packed up everything I owned into my parents' '86 Toyota 4Runner, drove back down. I sold everything else that I couldn't fit in there. Drove back down to San Francisco, and I was like, hey, I guess I'm gonna figure this out. So like, I got on Craigslist and started looking for jobs, and you know, again, dating myself a little bit. You didn't have LinkedIn and stuff back then. It's like Craigslist was the place to go. So you know, interviewed at a ton of companies, and finally got a job. It looked like sales was the place to go, even though it was this like recession. Everyone seemed to be hiring in sales, and so that's kind of how I stumbled into sales. Was that experience. And the funny thing is, like, the first job I got, which it took me forever, like literally I think it was like 50, 60 interviews. I got to the final stage of like multiple levels a couple times, 5 or 6 times, and then they would say, hey, we really like you, but your math degree and your math background doesn't really, I don't really know. I think you're a smart guy, but we don't really know. We're going to go with someone who already has some experience. When I finally got the job, my first job, I then learned CRM, Salesforce. Like, that's what everyone was looking for. I didn't have it before. Now I had it. I learned CRM. I had a quota, and I was going towards it. And I could speak the lingo, because that was really important, because at that job it was a consumer home product. Again, back in 2008, that was backed by AIG, and I was only at that company for about 3 weeks before the government had pulled the funding and our entire company was laid off. So, you know, hindsight's 2020. I didn't really know anything about anything back then. So, like, I didn't realize that, you know, this company that I thought was helping people in the financial crisis, because it was helping them tap into their home equity without, like, taking on extra debt and payments. So it was, like, a really interesting product. There's actually a couple of them that exist right now that are doing really, really well. Timing was better. But back then, I didn't realize the issue. But we literally all got laid off overnight. But within that 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it was of experience I had now, knowing Salesforce, having a quota, attaining like a manager that would provide a referral. Again, everyone's still hiring for salespeople. So instead of it taking me like 3 months and 60 interviews, I had 3 offers in 1 week for my next sales job. And so that's when I really, really started to fall in love with this idea that, wow, I guess sales is a really good, if it's not going to be a career, it's a really good skill to develop early on in your career. Because it seems as if even when things are kind of hard, at that point it was like, holy shit, what am I going to do? I was out of money. It took me forever to get that first job. I literally took a job at Starbucks for a period of time before I landed that one, because I had to pay my bills. Like 3 weeks later, I had 3 job offers, and so in a really tough time. And so that's when I really realized that sales is such a vital skill set. And I really, as I developed in my career, I started to take that on as something that was a passion project. When I got success, I really wanted to try to help others understand the power of learning sales, and using that as a way to, even if you didn't want to be a career salesperson, to really help accelerate your career. Because once you understand sales, you typically can find work, even if it's not necessarily work you want to be doing. If that's not the type of person you are, you can find work in sales. And I think that's really a really important skill for people to have. And I really learned that early on once I stumbled into sales.
Interesting. So would you argue that if someone's like a recent grad that is wondering, like, what do I do, that sales would be a good place to start? Like, it's a foundational aspect of business that might be helpful for kind of anyone? Or is there certain personality types that should stay away? Because let me ask you this. how many people from your math department, the people that were in your math classes, went into sales?
Probably none that I know of. I mean,
None.
most of them went on to teach, or they were in like actuarial, or they're doing some sort of like engineering stuff. But I think that if you don't know what you want to do, it's a great place to start, because you can get exposed to so many other elements of business. So if you're thinking about not being some sort of professional where it requires a professional degree, like a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, right? Like where you actually have to go get certification beyond an undergraduate degree. If you went to college and you don't know what you want to do, I think sales is a great place to start, because generally you're going to float towards some sort of business endeavor, right? Like there's not a lot of things that you can do in life outside of work for a company if you don't have a professional degree. And if you have a college degree, right? So I spent this money on a college degree. You're either going to work in a business or on a business, right?
Right.
What else are you going to do? I mean, I guess you could kind of stumble into some sort of like, entertainment, these types of things. But even then, you're still a part of a business unless you're like the proprietor of that thing, right? Like you got to learn these skills. You got to learn how to acquire customers. You got to learn how to serve customers. You got to learn how business works in general. Like what is the economics of buying and selling, and how things work, and demand, and all that stuff. Like you got to learn that if you're going to be in business. All the rules require some sort of understanding. And so it's a great place to start, because even if you're not great at it, you can get skills that, again, are marketable and will help you find jobs in situations where you may not love doing it. But if you get good at it, and I think most people can get good at the things necessary to get a paycheck in, but the skills you learned around like communicating with people, networking, just understanding how businesses work, especially startups. If I'm graduating school, and I don't know what I'm going to do, like going and being a part of a startup. And if you're going to be a part of a startup, but you don't know how to code, like what are you going to do? Like go sell some stuff, right? Like, or at least go help try to figure that out. Like it's a great stepping stone to get a lot of fundamental skills, or just like raw skills, life skills that I think can help you in a lot of different areas of your career, regardless if you want to be the actual salesperson in the future or doing something else within business. I think that skill set translates quite well. And I mean, it's not just me saying that. I mean, I think the data shows that like over a third of all CEOs have some sort of sales background, right? Like that's a third of all these other potential areas. That's a pretty good number that says, hey, if you want a pretty good shot at doing something in business, we'll look at the people that are at the very top. Well, a good majority of them have some sort of sales background, which is a good indicator that it's a good step forward if you don't know what you want to do yet.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious, right? If you look at numbers like that, it's pretty incredible. And understanding the basics of business will serve you even if you're not in sales, right? So if you aren't a salesperson, maybe understanding what salespeople go through and understanding that whole motion might help. You did mention something here early in your story that I want to go back to, because you mentioned two things. First, you said go work at a startup. And then you mentioned your story of how you just kind of came down to San Francisco, the Bay Area. That sounds to me like it was pretty risky, right? What are your thoughts on risk when it comes to your career? Because some people listening might have a family, let's say, that is pretty traditional, right? Maybe their dad's a lawyer, he's a doctor, maybe mom's an accountant. And the idea of going and working at a startup company is pretty risky. What is there to be gained from taking risks like that, in your opinion?
Well, again, not again. Let me state that my answer to this isn't going to speak to those kids, because I don't know what it's like to have a doctor and an accountant as parents. Like my parents are janitors, so what's a risk to me? Not going to jail is a good alternative. Both my brother and sister are felons, and they've spent time in like a legitimate state penitentiary, like severe time, right? Like, what's risk for me? Like not being on a gutter, on drugs and something like that, or a jail like that. So I have a different perspective here than others, but I still think that if you're graduating from school, like there's the most risky thing you do is not try stuff, especially early on, because the more experiences you gain early in your career, the more likely you're going to find the thing that you're excited about, the thing that keeps you wanting to keep going and not feel like you're hitting a midlife crisis, which you see a lot of people going through these days, right? They get burnt out, or you see these conversations about that. That's why I'm always I'm pretty vocal about it. I don't even know what the hell that means. Like, what does it mean to burn out? And I think the reason why I don't feel like a lot of other people do is because, like, I feel super blessed in the opportunities that have been provided to me, what I've done in my career, and now as an entrepreneur, like I just know that I'm more likely to fail than to succeed, and the more failures I have, the more likely I will be to succeed in the future. Especially if I just failed, I'm more likely to get a little bit better than whatever that failure was just now if I just keep trying, right? Like, it's really hard to go backwards, right? Once you get some experience, it's really hard to go backwards. So what's the risk? The risk is, I mean, I guess early on, like, what is it? Are you supposed to continue your education towards a professional degree? Are you supposed to wait it out until you get this perfect job offer from the type of company that's going to give you some sort of like secured package, which again, I don't even know what that means, when you can see like there's some big companies right now laying off big layoff rounds during the pandemic, that companies, it's just like, it's all out there now. There's no safe solution in life. Like, you're either trying or you're failing, and like, if you just sit around and hope something's going to happen, you're not going to get anywhere. I think that's more of a risk than not trying something, right? Unless you already have a path towards something that you want to try out. I don't really see it being risky. Like, you're going to go get some experience. What is the risk? You don't like it and you quit, or you suck and you get fired? Yeah. Like, who cares? Like, who cares? The data shows half the people are going to, try it and get fired. That's what it shows, right? Sales development data shows that companies have to hire 2 to keep 1, and they're firing the first one of those 2 within the first 3 to 6 months because of performance. Like, what's the risk there? You sucked at it, or it was the wrong company. Who knows? But, the experience gained from that is either 1, knowledge that you don't want to do it, or 2, something that you can transfer into something else. Hey, maybe I sucked at doing that interruptive calling thing because cold calling was scary to me, and I just didn't want to pick up the phone. Well, now I know that, and maybe I enjoyed helping people learn how to use our product. I got good at that. So maybe customer success is more of your thing, or something like that. I don't know, and then you're going to go through like some basic tech support role and work your way up. Who knows? But what's the risk? I don't know. I'd be curious what your thoughts are. What do you hear about people saying is risky in that? Maybe I can answer that in a more definitive way, but I just don't see it as risk. I just see it as opportunity.
Of course. I mean, that's what I think no one can answer that question like you can, right? Because your story is unlike any story out there. Everyone has their own story, but you have a very, very unique story, right? I definitely don't have the same perspective where, the bar is not going to prison, right? If that's my level of success is like, did I go to prison? Well, all right. No one in my family's been to prison. So we got that going for us. But,
that's risky moving to the wrong city, I guess, these days, then, Kevin.
I guess, like, geez. It's interesting because I do come from a family that has, my uncles and my dad haven't had many jobs, They've had like 1 or 2 jobs their whole career, and they're well off, and they do good at what they do, and they're not in sales. But, my one uncle is, and he's been working at the same company for going on 30 years here. He's going to retire there, and he's in sales now. He's moved into it. Might be a good podcast guest to talk about what it's like to work at one company for 30 years in sales. Pretty incredible. But it like, I've definitely, I know personally, I'm sure people listening to this have thought about, well, what if I leave this? I'm at Salesforce, I'm at Oracle, I'm at, big company. I've got sick bennies. I've got, all this good stuff going for me. But the startup wants me to come run sales or be an AE or be a hunter. It's a perceived level of risk to try and go do something that you're unfamiliar with. And I love your perspective on that. Like that's a perspective only you can give, Ryan. One of the things I want to talk about here though, because I think this is really interesting when someone looks at your LinkedIn profile, you talked about failures. This doesn't look like a failure to me. It looks like you worked at a company, Booshaka, that got acquired by a much bigger company called Sprinkler. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? What was that like being a VP at a company that got acquired?
Well, that's the thing about what looks can look like too. I mean, again, and perceived risk and things like that. So it's a great question. So Booshaka was an early innovator in Facebook audience. So Facebook, at the time when I made the move to Booshaka, was actually allowing truly like one-to-one advertising if you had like followers or fans, right? Like you used to go and get people to like your page. Remember seeing those ads everywhere, or not ads, I guess they were ads, but like everywhere you went, like they had Foursquare campaigns, like our page and get free stuff, right? So once you had a liker, like you had that person and you could advertise to that person one-to-one. You used to see like t-shirt ads for like, hey, Kevin, like on the shirt type of thing, right? Like it was like a printed shirt. So Booshaka was doing that type of stuff when I made the move to that company. And prior to Booshaka, I was actually the head of sales of a company called SellPoints, which was also acquired by another company. But at SellPoints, and we were just coming off of Inc. 5000 and helped them, bring on some acquisitions, etc. But SellPoints was doing something similar, but not using Facebook. And I saw Facebook being the kind of future of advertising. And when I made the move to Booshaka, the founder was coming out of seed, raising Series A. They had a really good install base of this app that they created called Top Fans. And Top Fans was like a leaderboard tool that would go and allow big brands to collect all these followers so they could do one-to-one ads. Well, I joined that company in like March, and I think it was April. Facebook changed their terms of services and basically cut off like almost all the revenue overnight. And so we had to make a pivot from this like one-to-one audience tool that they were trying to build, which is eventually kind of what Booshaka ended up doing. But it went from one-to-one to where Facebook followers were a big source to, I guess we're going to go figure out this audience product. So Facebook custom audiences were just starting to get started. There wasn't a lot of brands spending a ton of money on paid social yet because they were getting so much reach out of the organic social. But that's why Facebook changed this so that people would start to have to pay more. And so we had to pivot and build product from scratch. Ended up getting us into an accelerator program in Silicon Valley called Plug and Play. And that was a big win for us because you had to go to this pitch competition, and I was like on stage, and you have to like pitch, and you go through all these rounds. And eventually we got accepted. And in order to get accepted, you had to have like retailers actually selected you. They like sponsor these programs, and then during the program you get like one-to-one opportunities. And so we got in, and it just so happened that like Walmart was really interested in what we were doing, and also Mars, which is a bigger company than a lot of people understand. It's like M&M's, and like it's like Pedigree. Like they have like $15 billion brands under one umbrella.
Yeah, conglomerate.
So while we were building the product, I was helping us go sell some deals with this new like Facebook custom audience product, which has its up and down. We got some decent wins out of that, but what the real win was is we got a pilot started with both Mars and Walmart together. I kind of built this thing, this really strategic program that was supposed to be a replacement to some of their programs that Walmart was already selling in-house. So a lot of people don't understand this, but this is what we did at SellPoints was we create these channel programs with big retailers and big brands. So I kind of use that experience to do the same thing with Walmart and Mars. So Mars fronts the bills. the bill, the actual ad spend, and like the actual payments of the program, and then the retailer fronts the data, right? So we were able to use Walmart data to power these really interesting programs, and then Mars is paying for it. So that's kind of the business model there. And while Eric was trying to raise Series A, he hit a lot of roadblocks because, well, we just lost all of our revenue. So when you're going for that next round, you don't want to have all your revenue cut off overnight. So we had good growth, and then bam, it's gone. So we're trying to replace that, and there's some good traction, but he was kind of at the end of the road. And so during that process, which just happens often in these earlier stage companies who are funded by professional investors, the seed round had some good angels behind it. We ended up having a couple different acquisition conversations, but we ended up getting acquired by Sprinkler, which, if folks don't know them, they just went public this last year. But prior to that, they were like one of the fastest growing software companies of all times. And we just fit really nicely into their acquisition strategy. They already had paid social. They had acquired one of the bigger paid social advertising companies. Actually, Simon's business was the one there. Simon.
Right. Simon, I go way back.
So Simon's business was just doing paid social. Sprinkler had a technology they were developing to just do like advertising. It's like an ads manager on top of the paid social apps, but we were going to bring the audience product. So Booshaka became Sprinkler Audience, and that's how that happened. But when you talk about that experience, like as a success, like we got an exit out of it. We got somewhere with the business, but I joined having left a company where I had just grown them, met Inc. 5000. That's how fast we were growing over there. Had a really good set of clients. The challenge with Sell Points was their technology was frustrating me because it wasn't getting to where it needed to be. So I was excited about Booshaka. I got recruited over there to go lead sales and build a team. But then the technology it was like the same problem with less resources. And I gave up what would have been like guaranteed cash in exchange for equity that actually didn't even come to fruition because the acquisition happened before I even vested. Right? We went through that whole pivot and acquisition within 9 months. Right? So,
and you had no triggers in your equity to vest?
Nope.
Ooh.
It's a 1 year cliff, and then it was just a new deal with Sprinkler. So, I mean, I made some money after there was like this earn out and things like that like we had to go and install, and I was in my role. I had to go and accomplish some milestones. I made some money out of it, but not as, I worked way harder and probably could have made just the same amount, if not maybe even more, if I would have just stuck around at Sell Points as the head of sales over there. So when you think about stories like that, it's good on paper, but also that was actually a big risk that didn't pay off, right? It paid off from experience and, of course, like brand and credibility of being a part of a startup that was then acquired by one that's now public. Like that's all good stuff. But when it comes to the monetary side of things, not so much. It was more about the experience, right? I was able to learn how to get a startup into an accelerator. I learned how to pitch at an accelerator. I've since become a mentor as a part of that accelerator because, we got acquired as a part of it. We're a plaque on the wall, like my signature's on the wall at Plug and Play. All of that's really cool from an experience perspective. But when you think about success at around that stage in your career, you start to think about real money. And that was the point of going to Booshaka, because I had a really good chunk of equity that didn't come to fruition because of just the way that you learn about these things, right? 1 year cliff, and then the vesting schedule, and then there's also preferred stock and triggers with the investors and things like that make it such that, if you're an employee, so that, becoming a head of sales of some company, even if you're an executive, you're still an employee. Like there's a lot of people getting paid before you get paid once people start raising that kind of money.
Right. Interesting. And that's this is exactly like kind of what I was hoping to get out. This is phenomenal. Who would have known? If you look at your LinkedIn like that, the progression is really awesome. You go from one company as a VP to another. That company gets acquired by this major brand. It looks incredible, and it was incredible for certain reasons, right? But
yeah.
I've always when I talk to other people that are in tech, the reason you play this game and the reason you're in tech is for those liquidity events, the acquisitions, the going publics, the day where you might make a few $1 million in a minute, right?
Yeah, but you have to understand that employees who make $1 million on an IPO are, I mean, that's more rare than the unicorns that are being created.
Right.
There are unicorns that are going IPO or have some sort of a future exit, and especially if they don't go public and they just get acquired, the founders aren't making anything. Like maybe a few $1,000,000, but the amount of time they spend into that company over a decade, like it's watch the movie Silicon Valley. I know it's like a joke, but it's very, very similar. Like most people aren't going to make a lot of money as a sales hire at a startup, right? Now, granted, with the Booshaka situation, I thought I'd get there. I mean, my equity would have been equivalent to about 4% of that company, which is quite a bit considering where they were at that time. Although there was, a lot of work to be done too. So I thought it was a good deal for me coming in at that point. They had a couple $1 million in revenue. They had the historical company, and then it just kind of got chopped. But 4% of whatever would have been of that company would have been probably a good bet. But even the amount of dilution that would have happened over time would have required, $100+ million exit for it to really make sense, like for the time spent, right? Versus just being a sales leader in another company, knocking down $500,000-$600,000 a year, with commissions and base. And then I had equity in sell points too, but I never really thought about the equity there, just because it just gets so diluted so much. Like there has to be big exits for it to make sense. Most companies aren't getting acquired for that kind of money that's going to turn you into a millionaire overnight.
That's really interesting stuff. And I don't think that everyone knows that. I think that a lot of, especially junior salespeople, get sold pretty hard on equity as part of their offering when they're, the 13th SDR hired this year. And equity is a piece of the package that people position as something super valuable. It's interesting if you know the math, right? And from your firsthand experience, how rare it is for that to really pay out in a meaningful way, right?
Like, yeah, there's we could try to find this for the show notes too, Kevin, because I think you're kind of hitting on this as being an important topic. There's a resource out there that I can find for people. I used to send them to it in the boot camp around like how to calculate equity, what questions to ask, and there's a lot of variables at play when you are evaluating what that means. And for the most part, and it's not and I used to think it was the founders just being a little bit just not forthcoming, but they don't really know, right? You won't know until you know. But like the first thing is it's not truly equity; they're stock options, right? So no one's giving you pure equity. So that's the first thing. Right. No one's giving you pure equity. So they say it's equivalent to or whatever. It's not. That's not. Again, go back to how things get triggered and the preferences based on the investors and the rounds and the new terms and all that stuff. Every time more money comes in, all that stuff changes. It's negotiated and it can get changed, right? It depends on how it works. And so most founders aren't going to know this when they're talking to you at seed versus what it actually becomes if it ends up going public or some sort of acquisition later on, right? They don't know because if you had a crystal ball, then they probably wouldn't be talking to you anyway as a rep, right? Like they would have already figured it all out. So that's one thing. But when you look at, it's not true equity, it's stock options. Those options, like each round can become interesting, right? Because there's a strike price associated with like how do you actually buy those shares? It's a certain you get a certain amount of the option to pay at a certain price. And so if the company's doing well, like that can make money, right? Like if I would have stuck around and invested at Sprinkler, for example, I probably could have made even more money if I stuck around because now it's public. Like that would have become maybe a few $100,000 or something after the fact. But, because there was an equity package, a stock option package there. And but the earlier on that you are within a company, the less likely that'll ever actually become a liquidity event, right? Like there's just going to be too many layers there. So there's this sweet spot here around understanding what that is, how many outstanding shares there are, so you can actually understand the percentage the actual amount that means in the current pie. Now, keep in mind, if I start a business right now and I have 10 million outstanding shares right now, and I divvy that up between the founders, and then I have an equity pool for other people, there's nothing like a company can add anytime they want. Like, all they have to do is, the board agrees to adding more equity, more shares to the pie, and bam, all of a sudden everyone gets diluted. That's how the rounds work, right? So they don't know what they don't know. They also, things change dramatically. The more successful the company is, the better off you're going to be. So if you can get on a rocket ship, that could be that could potentially happen. But the chances of that happening are like, they're few and far between. So like, you can't go into a company that's been around for even like 3 or 4 years and hasn't already been like freaking crushing, like they're not already on their path to almost going public, and expect to make a bunch of money, because they're struggling, right? If you're around for that long, you're not the next thing. You're not one of those, right? So there's like a lot of questions you can ask. I'll follow on that resource and I'll send it out. But there's, what's the current strike price, the outstanding shares, all that stuff, right? And that'll help people that have never experienced this, like, wrap their mind around how this stuff works. But there's a really good article that outlines this. I wouldn't have known all that stuff until I got to that point where it actually meant something. And since then, right, Booshaka was acquired, Sell Points has been acquired, Uversity was acquired. I had options in all of those companies. I ended up buying my options to Sell Points, which I never should have. Now that I know that after the fact, but I was like, oh, because like, even with that exit, it converted. Like, it didn't even become cash for us. The conversion went into stock. So now I own stock in some other company called Conversion Point, which who knows if they ever go anywhere. I got books that company was going to go public too, and then it never did. And even if it did, it would have been like, it's like a conversion on a conversion. So like, you learn a lot along the way, but I wouldn't ever bank a decision to work for a company based on the equity. I would look at it in terms of early on in your career, in terms of how much can you learn. There's 2 things you should always ask yourself. How much can you earn? How much can you learn? And early on, you can sacrifice your earnings for learnings. But as you start to get more and more established, you should really maximize your whiffum. What's in it for me? Like, later on in your career. If you're a salesperson, right? Like, that's just, it's just getting sucked into that is risky, right? Especially once you get the skill set that can demand the higher earnings.
Of course. We are going to find that resource and put it in the notes 100%. I think that's something that probably 95% of the people that will ever hear this don't have a great grasp on, right? Including myself. I have a rudimentary understanding of it, and I've had a lot of paper equity in a lot of companies. But thank you for sharing. Yeah, that's
if you're not the owner, like, so if you're not the founder, then like, just expect the equity's not going to be worth much.
Right. Yeah. Ipso facto, if you are an employee, the odds are, the math would show that it's not going to be life-changing equity.
No.
Interesting. Well, Ryan, thanks a lot, man. I got 3 last questions for you that I'm going to ask every guest on this show. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. The last 3 questions everyone is going to get asked. I hope everyone answers them. I hope they answer them honestly. So the first question, what's the biggest commission check you've ever gotten?
It was definitely my sprinkler. It was more like the bonus thing, but like I said, when we got acquired by Sprinkler, I had like this bonus thing. So I got it in one check. It was 85 grand. It was the down payment on my house in Turlock. So it's like it was just over $80,000. Like, that's what in one check. It was not like dispersed out over time. It was like one check, and that was accumulation of commissions earned, but also the me hitting the milestone within that time frame. I had 1 year to get to a certain pipeline threshold for the new product, and that's what kicked me out to start Inside Sales Bootcamp and buy my house. So
that's a lot of money.
My biggest one check.
Yeah, I mean, that's more than a lot of sales reps make in a year. I mean, entry level, right? That's like a base salary check for an account executive at a lot of places. Incredible. I love it. The next question, sales or not, what has been your favorite job that you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be a sales job.
My favorite job?
Yeah, the favorite job that you had. Like, what was your favorite job? Like, if you had to stop your career right now and look back, the favorite job I had was...
Yeah, I worked for a window factory in college one summer. And that might be my favorite job, believe it or not. It was like a night shift, swing shift, I think they called it. Like it was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon was when it started, and we didn't get off till like, what was it, be like 10 or 11 at night. It was like that like your schedule's a little bit off, but you're like literally working in a factory. And I worked on the framing side. It was like they built windows, so they had the frames and then the glass. I didn't work in the glass shop. That would have sucked. But the frame shop, you did all sorts of different roles. You'd rotate through, and it was like every other week you're kind of doing a little bit something. But it's like an assembly line. Like you literally work off of a freaking whistle with brakes, and I had a lot of fun there because the people that I worked with were good people. We would, after work, it's late. It was that time of night where you go and you're not going to just go right to sleep. Because you kind of be like up till a couple of wee hours of the morning, but you go and like have drinks and hang out after work with like the group people, and that was probably my favorite job so far. If I could do anything, if that paid the bills, looking back, that was like a lot of fun. It's just like really good people, never any drama. You didn't take work home.
Right.
And
very straightforward work.
Yeah, it was just, you did lots of different types of jobs too, so you kind of got cycled through, but yeah, that was probably my favorite job.
Okay, well, you touched on it there. The last question, which I think is just a fascinating question for everybody in this day and age, is if money didn't matter, what would you do to fill your time? Would you work? What would you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if like money truly didn't matter at this stage in my life, I would spend a lot more time, because my kids are so small right now. I'd spend more time with them. I'd probably still do something because I'd probably get bored. Like my wife, for example, works part-time. Doesn't have to, but she does it because she wants to work and get away. So I'm sure I'd do something. But like, to be honest, if money wasn't a problem right now, I'd try to spend more time with the kids. So maybe I'd probably do like volunteer. I'd probably volunteer to try to help people, like do the type of stuff I did with the boot camp. Like trying to help people that are underserved learn some skills to get to jumpstart their careers, because I'm really passionate about that, and I like helping people who want to be helped. I don't like it when they're forced for that. So like if money wasn't an issue, I think that would be a really fun job, like a really good thing to do. I could do that for forever. Helping people who truly want to be helped, like change their lives, would be a lot of fun. So it's probably what I do. Just a couple hours a week,
Right. I love it. That's very intrinsically rewarding is what that would be, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not extrinsically rewarding. It's interesting. I mean, this is episode, your guest 1, so I'm going to do this probably throughout the year. I'm really interested to hear if anybody says that like their current job is their favorite, or is there going to be someone who's going to say, I want to do what I'm doing right now for the rest of my life? And if that person does, if we get to the very end of the podcast and that's their answer, we're doing another podcast on that job. which, by the way, I feel like we got to maybe half your resume. So you're going to have to come back on the show at some point here and talk about founding companies, because you've done that a few times. We worked together at one of them, and I feel like there's probably a lot that everyone can learn from that. But the lessons today around probably risk-taking and what equity really means is what I'm going to take away. So thanks a lot for coming on, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate your time. Anyone who's listening in, if you have any additional questions, or if I could be helpful early on in your career, make some decisions, I'm always open for a chat. So don't hesitate to reach out. Kevin knows that. That's how we met, right?
That's right,
that, Kevin.
Yeah. We met in person. Met on LinkedIn. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
If you actually want to have a conversation with me, then my number's on my LinkedIn profile. Call me, leave a voicemail, and I'll call you back. Probably won't answer, but I will call you back if you leave a voicemail. That's the best way to have a conversation with me. Otherwise, LinkedIn's a good place to connect, comment, like, share, DM me. I'm usually somewhat active there, but not always. But those are the two best shots on goal. Don't send me a cold email, even if it's thoughtful. I just don't have time to review spam. So that's it.
There we go. Good to know. Don't send the cold calling guy an email. It's a good way to not get responded to. All right, Ryan. Well, we'll end the show right here. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Kevin. Talk soon.
If this episode is interesting to you, please share your thoughts on LinkedIn or Twitter. Tag me, and I might just feature your post in an upcoming episode of the Sales Career Podcast. Or, if you want to connect directly, go to hopconsultinggroup.com, and we'll find a way to work together. Cheers.